Our next speaker wore the service uniform of a firefighter for 25 years as a lieutenant of the New York City Fire Department. For 15 years, he served in Engine Company Number 10, located directly across from the South Tower of the World Trade Center.
Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, I'm so deeply honored to be here and sharing this special weekend, the 86th annual convention of the FFA. And I have to tell you, honestly, it was no more than less than a year ago that I actually knew nothing about your organization. But I've come to find out so much about who you are and what you do. And I guess if I had any regrets in life, my one regret would be that I didn't have an opportunity to do what you're doing. Coming from a ghetto in Brooklyn, New York, there was no such things as cows and pigs. It was just a different life. But I'm here today to get to know each and every one of you and to share the stories about me. But today is not about Joe Torrillo and that story that you just saw up on that screen. Although I'm one of the few survivors and the only one who survived the collapse of both Twin Towers, I came here today to let you know that this day is about heroes, but I am not a hero. Heroes get carried to their graves in cemeteries. 343 firefighters in New York City gave their all in a supreme sacrifice. And for reasons I'll never understand, God spared my life. And I'm sure that as people tell me that he has a new purpose and a reason for that. And people all around the world who I travel and share my story with, they refer to me as a hero. But nowhere in the dictionary, when you look up the word hero, does a definition say you have a uniform and a chest of medals. Boys and girls, today when I leave here, I never asked anybody to do anything for me. But today I'm going to do something more than that. I'm not going to ask, I'm going to beg every one of you to live your life and be the hero that a New York City firefighter has always looked for. And I know that after today, when I leave here, a lot of you will remember this very special couple of days where you all came together, chapters from all over the 50 states, to share with one another about what you do back home, about the places you come from, and all the other things that young kids like to talk about and share. And maybe one day in the future, when you think about this day, you'll remember me. And maybe you'll remember some of the words that I want to impart upon you today. You'll remember this guy that's half Tony Soprano, half Super Mario. I'm just a Brooklyn kid, and that's all I ever was. As a matter of fact, I'm always so careful when I travel because when a guy like me from Brooklyn gets off a plane in Louisville, Kentucky, typically you're only here for one reason. You're in the witness protection program. And when I did get off of the plane, I was carrying my uniform, and an old lady was reading my name on my jacket. She says, is that Torrillo? I said, yes. She says, is that an Italian name? And I said, yes, it is. She says, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. You know, ask me all the questions. I'm just waiting for my ride to take me to the hotel. She says, why is it that Italians don't like Jehovah's Witnesses? But I didn't know that. And I didn't really have a legitimate answer for her. So I felt compelled to say something. So I said, to be honest with you, we don't like any witnesses. Thank you. You know, boys and girls, you can't be serious all the time. And one of the messages that I'm going to deliver as we go on in the next half hour is, you know, in life, you need to be all that you can be. Okay? It's not important, boys and girls, to try to be better than anybody else. If you do that, you end up driving yourself crazy. And a lot of people do that. They just never really get it, as we say back home in New York City. But what you should always endeavor to do is not to be better than anybody else. From this day forward, I will ask every one of you to be better than anybody you ever thought you could be. Can everybody promise me that? Now, before I go on, I know I'd be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity to thank Mr. Marshall Poole and his whole committee for giving me this opportunity. I stand here humbled before all of you. An organization, like I said, I wish I could have been a part of. And as I was making out my Christmas list last night, alone in the hotel, on my Christmas list, number one was a blue corduroy jacket. I don't know how I look in it, but And boys and girls, that blue corduroy jacket is not just an article of clothing. That blue corduroy jacket symbolizes the people that you are and the organization that you belong to. The same way that people would give their right arm to wear this uniform of the New York City Fire Department, considered one of the best emergency services on the face of the earth. And I wear this uniform in my retirement with honor, and the same thing you should do. As you go through life, one of the things that your organization should be doing for you is to make you grow into responsible adults. And boys and girls, don't ever think that life is not about having fun. As a matter of fact, if you miss an opportunity in life to have a good time, you've all made a very, very big mistake. Life is about having fun. But boys and girls, I learned something. And the best lessons I ever learned in my life were the things that I did bad and wrong, not the things that I did good and right. And boys and girls, the difference between those who succeed and those that fail are the ones who didn't recognize that imaginary line in the sand. There's a line that you go up to, but you know you don't cross that line. And we all do from time to time. I crossed that line a number of times in my life, and I paid the price for it. And I don't want you to follow mistakes, but they're going to happen to you. In all the hospitals I've been in my career in the New York City Fire Department, one of the opportunities I always capture when I'm in hospitals is to go past the nursery where the newborn babies are. I'm not a weirdo. I just like looking at the little babies in incubators, because I'm always wondering, what are they all thinking? Everybody's different, a different size, a different color, a boy or girl. And they don't really know what life has in store for them. And there's two things that I always noticed in every nursery, in every hospital. Not one of those babies had a stamp on its butt when they were changing their diaper that said guaranteed for life. And another thing I noticed is that none of them had a pair of wings on their back. So boys and girls, get over it. None of us are angels. Right? Nobody expected you to be. But you need to be more than anybody you thought you could ever be. And boys and girls, when I travel all around the country and I capture hundreds and thousands of opportunities every single year to speak at a variety of venues to many different audiences, one of the groups of people I love speaking to is this age group right here. Because I'm going to tell you why. Adults like me, adults like your neighbors and your mothers and fathers, we underestimate your talent and your intelligence. I was telling a friend not too long ago, if I was the president of the United States, I would step down and I would let the young people of this country run the United States of America, because they would probably do a better job than we do. And I'm not here to blow smoke in your eye. I came here, there was a couple of other places I could have been today, but this was an opportunity I knew that I couldn't miss. And I know certainly for Marshall Poole, who made it possible, my agent, Ann Land, I'm so grateful and so humble, because I don't ever think I'm going to get an opportunity as big as this ever again. On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I was a keynote speaker at the Richard Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, California, in the morning. And after I was done, I got a phone call from my friend, Tim Mead. He's the vice president of the California Angels. And he says to me, "Joe, I hear you're in town." I said, "Tim, yeah, I'm speaking at the Richard Nixon Library for the 10th anniversary. He says, "Joe, great." He says, "You know, Anaheim Stadium's only 20 minutes away, and guess who's playing the California Angels?" I said, "You don't have to tell me. I'm a Yankee fan. The New York Yankees are in town." He says, "Joe, would you come here and throw out the first pitch?" I says, "Tim, I wish you were here, because I'd make you twist my arm. And if you had to twist my arm, it would have gone that far." And I says, "Okay, I'm your man, I'll be there." And boys and girls, coming from Brooklyn, New York, being a diehard Yankee fan, the greatest sports team that has ever created, ever lived. We got some Yankee fans here. Do we have anybody from Boston? Where's Boston? Hey, you know, I tell you what, Boston is a great town. I love Boston besides New York City, and I really do really, really do love the Boston Red Sox. I think they're a great team. And I know that's hard for a Yankee fan to say, but I finally realized why God created the New York Yankees, so the Boston Red Sox could have heroes. I guess I'm not going to be allowed back in Boston anymore. But boys and girls, as you saw in that opening video, I'm going to take a time to share my personal story, and I'm a little hesitant sometimes because I don't want people to think that I'm promoting myself. I don't want people to think that I travel and make these events the Joe Torrillo sob story. But people tell me, Joe, you've got to share your story because not only is it interesting, it's very, very ironic. Boys and girls, men and women, slightly more than 12 years ago, on September 11, 2001, it was a day that it seemed the world stood still for a full day in all 198 countries of Earth. It was a day where the United States was attacked 4 times in 3 different locations by terrorists. And I was in the middle of it in New York City. My firehouse was right across the street where I began my career in 1980. And boys and girls, by the time the sun went down that evening in New York City, 2,349 innocent Americans lost their lives, and another 403 rescue workers gave theirs in what's considered the greatest rescue effort ever undertaken by any emergency service in the world. And at the nighttime, those twin towers of the World Trade Center, which were once considered symbols of structural strength, iconic figurines of financial freedom, lay down upon themselves in a pile of twisted steel, tons of slabs of broken concrete, covered with mountains and mountains of sheetrock dust. And in those remains were a total of 2,752 people. People like you and I. Some of them might even been FFA members at one time. But they were just like you. They were Americans doing the right thing. Didn't deserve to meet their ending that way. They got up that morning like you and I and had no idea it was going to be the last day of their life. I was involved, boys and girls, from the very, very beginning. As a matter of fact, I was under the second jet. It came right over my head when United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower 17 minutes after the North Tower. And the following morning, in a desperate rescue attempt, which was really more than a recovery, because to think that eventually we would find anybody alive was a stretch of the imagination, but we had to give the family hope. I was declared dead for 3 days. When the South Tower came down, I was right underneath it, and I realized I had about 10 seconds left to live. And all I was afraid of was that my body would never be found or identified. All I was asking for is for a funeral for my family. And I started running, but I never made it. The South Tower came down, and as it came down, a huge piece of steel hit me in the back of the head, opened up the whole back of my head. All my ribs were broken, my arm was snapped in half, my shoulders were torn off, my back was crushed, and I was bleeding internally. And I'm buried underneath the South Tower with all these other people. They were screaming at the top of their lungs. We couldn't see each other. We were all pinned under steel and concrete, and we were suffocating. And I begged God to take my life. I couldn't live in this pain, and a few minutes later, we were all in the middle of all these fires. And then the screams of those people turned into cries, cries turned into whimpers, and whimpers turned into silence, and one by one, they had all died. I'll never know them. We couldn't see each other, and I was still breathing. And then at that point, people came and they were digging, and they found me, and they got me on a boat. And on the boat, they were intending to take me across the river to New Jersey to a hospital because I had to get there immediately if they were going to save me. And then a half hour later, the North Tower fell, and it fell on top of the boat, and I got buried in the engine room of the boat all alone. And once again, I'm suffocating, I can't breathe, and I'm in tremendous pain for almost an hour until they found me again, buried in the engine room, and then the boat was taken across the river to a hospital in New Jersey. But nobody thought about looking in hospitals in other states, and that's where I ended up, in New Jersey, a hospital called Jersey City Trauma Center. And for 3 days, I was declared missing because I was misidentified. You see, boys and girls, this all leads up to the most interesting part of the story. But before I go into that story, it's very important, boys and girls, that I give a shout out to an FFA group here that came from where I come from, New York City. We have a group to the left here, the John Bound FFA chapter, with their advisor, Steve Perry. Steve, can you stand up very quickly? Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Thank you to the John Bound FFA chapter from Flushing, Queens. Boys and girls, I'm going to tell you a very quick story about them. The only thing that was surviving after the rescue and recovery effort was a lone calorie pantry, which was on the ground of the World Trade Center. During the rescue and recovery, we found this pantry severely burned and damaged. And there was a group of us that said, we got to save this tree. It seemed to be the right thing to do. It was the only living thing still standing. And they unrooted that calorie pantry. They took it up to Bronx, which is another part of New York City, and they replanted it along with the New York City Park Department, the Bartlett Tree Service. And the tree started regenerating itself. It was like life came back to the World Trade Center all through a single tree. And as that tree began to flourish, they were able to produce seedlings. And today, right now, with the FFA chapter, the John Bound chapter in Flushing, Queens, they produce 421 seedlings into new calorie pantries. And all of those trees will be given out by the September 11 Family Association and the National World Trade Center Museum to places around the country, symbolizing the rebirth of the people that died on the World Trade Center. As of right now, I believe one of those seedlings were given up to Boston because of the attack at the Marathon, in Newtown, Connecticut because of that horrendous school shooting, in Rockaway, Queens, when Sandy hit and destroyed every single home, and also into Arizona in honor of the hotshot mountain firefighters who lost their lives recently fighting that ferocious fire. And the other seedlings will be given out by the decision of the World Trade Center Committee to people all around the country. So once again, to the John Bound, I love that story. It really symbolizes what America is about. Well, boys and girls, let me just share my story with you because this is a story I think you're going to love. This is a story that most people never heard. I'm hesitant about talking about it because people kind of think you might be promoting yourself or looking for sympathy. No, it's an interesting story, but in New York City on September 11th, there was so many different ironic stories, happy ones and sad ones, good ones and bad ones. And people just seem to think that my story was the most ironic story of all. You see, boys and girls, I started my career in the firehouse across the street from the World Trade Center, Engine Company 10. I started my career there in 1980 when that firehouse opened. And I stood there for 16 years until I was promoted to lieutenant on September 5th, 1996. And on February 26, 1993, I was there when terrorists set off a 2,000-pound bomb in the second sublevel of the North Tower and attempted to blow the North Tower over into the South Tower. That day, thousands and thousands of people could have really been killed, but luckily the force of the explosion didn't go up. The force of the explosion went down and blew all the sublevels below grade down to its foundation. And I hate to say luckily and only, but only six and a half people. 6 people, and which one of them was a pregnant woman. But there could have been many, many more deaths. And from that day forward, the terrorists realized that they had failed themselves and they would make another attempt 8 years later on September 11th. Well, boys and girls, I was not working in that firehouse anymore. I was promoted to a lieutenant. And shortly after being promoted to lieutenant, I got hurt very serious in a fire on New Year's Eve of 1996 going into 1997. I was a brand new lieutenant. An alarm came into the firehouse at the stroke of midnight as we were going into the new year, and a report of a woman was trapped on the second floor in the rear of a building. And in that rescue attempt, I got hurt very seriously. My left thumb was just about completely cut off of my hand. A piece of glass from a skylight on the roof had come down and went right through my hand. And after the fire was out, I went outside. The EMTs and the paramedics took my glove off, and my thumb basically just fell down, and they rushed me to the hospital. And I was so scared, not because of the injury, because I was afraid the fire department would say, I'm no longer able to be a firefighter, and they would retire me because of that injury. And I was devastated. I had just become a lieutenant. I studied so hard for that promotion. My next step was to study for captain in chief. I was intending to climb the ladder, so to speak, with no pun intended. And I was devastated. And the doctors told me, it looks like you're never going to go back again. And I begged them, please let me go back. I'll do anything I have to do. I'll have additional surgeries. I'll go to physical therapy. I'll see other medical specialists. Please give me an opportunity to kind of recoup and to see if my hand would work the way a firefighter's hand should work. And they says, okay, we see the passion in you, and we're going to give you a chance, but we don't think you're going to be back for about a year. And so they gave me a desk job working in headquarters, and I never worked in an office in my life. I didn't know what I was going to do working in fire department headquarters Monday to Friday. I had no office skills. I didn't even know how to turn a computer on. And I couldn't even imagine what they would want me to do in this building. And my biggest fear was that they were going to ask me to answer telephones. Now, how could a voice like this answer phones? I mean, honestly, if you called up fire department headquarters and I answered the phone, what would you think? Tony Soprano's house. But in any event, they asked me to work in their Office of Fire Safety Education. I didn't know we had an Office of Fire Safety Education, and I didn't even know what they did in that office. In essence, it was a group of other firefighters who were recuperating from other types of injuries. Because we couldn't work in a firehouse, we would go out every single day, Monday to Friday, to one of the 2,000 schools of New York City and preach the message to kids about preventing and surviving a fire. We were on a mission to lower fatalities and fires in New York City through the mode of public education. Boys and girls, I got thrown in something I knew nothing about. And the marvel of the story, as you're going to see, life changes. Life takes you down roads you didn't know were meant for you. Life takes you down roads that offer challenges and changes all of us in so many different ways. And that's why, boys and girls, all through life, you got to be resilient like a palm tree. It's important to keep your eyes open and your hearts open for change. Change is not always easy, but sometimes change is good and necessary. So here I am, I'm in the Office of Fire Safety Education. I got no idea what I'm doing there. And I didn't promise them that I can help them in any big way, but I stood there and I made the best of it, like every one of you should do in your life. Make the best of every opportunity, whether or not it seems right from the very beginning. And boys and girls, 8 months into that assignment, I was named the director of the whole program. I'd opened up a whole new path in my career. I wasn't a teacher. I had no background in education. I wasn't a public speaker. I'm a carpenter, plumber, electrician by trade. What am I doing here? And they say, you want me to be the director? So I accepted the position. I wanted the challenge. I wanted to see what I could do if, in fact, I could help reduce fires and fatalities, something that's very important to save a life. And as a new director of fire safety education, and as a creative person my whole life, I always created since I was a kid. And boys and girls, I'm the youngest person in the world who earned a PhD. I earned my PhD when I was 10 years old. I was like you. I was poor, hungry, and driven. And today, you're all earning your PhD without the cap and gown. And as the new director of this program, I decided we should have a learning center where kids can go on a school trip. I mean, that's the way kids like to learn. All learning is multisensory. Since the day the first caveman crawled out of the cave, right? That's how we learn. And that's what kids like. They like going on school trips. So I sold this big idea of having a learning center, and they told me to take on a project, and I did. And I designed the learning center. I worked on it for 2 years nonstop. We opened in October 2000, called the Fire Zone in the heart of New York City. And a month later, I got a phone call. You're being nominated for an Emmy Award. And boys and girls, I won an Emmy Award for the first Fire Safety Learning Center. And if you think these things can't happen to you, you're very mistaken. Boys and girls, good things happen to good people who constantly do good things. It's easy. It happens to all of us. Oprah Winfrey didn't know she was going to be Oprah Winfrey when she was a kid. No famous people knew where their lives would take, and you're no different. You got 2 arms, Oprah has 2 arms, so what's the difference? The difference is what do you want to be and how much you're going to commit yourself. So we open up the Learning Center, and I'm spending my time promoting it, and then at that point I get a call from Fisher-Price Toys. I figured they got a wrong phone number. What do you want? This is, we want to run something by you might be interested in. Well, what is it? They said, are you familiar with our little action figures called Rescue Heroes? I said, no, I'm not. Well, let us tell you about it. We have a whole line of action figures called Rescue Heroes. A little police officer called Jake Justice, an ambulance attendant called Perry Medic, a lifeguard called Wendy Waters, a mountain climber called Cliffhanger, a construction worker called Jack Hammer. They wanted a New York City firefighter to be their new rescue hero. They were going to call him Billy Blazes. And if I helped them design it, I was going to get $1 for every one sold all around the world. And I sat down with the Fisher-Price executives in January of 2001. And as I was telling them what a firefighter looks like with his bunker gear, his tools, his equipment, his air mask, the artists were drawing pictures on an art pad, and they took the artwork to their factory. And they made the first mold and prototype 6 months later, in July of 2001. And they want to have a big press conference in New York City. They want to introduce this new rescue hero, Billy Blazes, to the world. And they're asking me, where can we have a press conference? I said, let's do it at the Fire Zone. What's the Fire Zone? It's a new learning center that I won an Emmy Award for. And they says, wow, that'll be great. We'll introduce this new rescue hero, Billy Blazes, a New York City firefighter at the new Children's Learning Center. Well, they were so excited. They said, when can we do it? We know where, but when? This meeting was July 2001. So I says, okay, look, we're going to do the press conference in the Fire Zone at Rockefeller Center. Let's do it in October. It's Fire Prevention Month. And the Fisher-Price executives thought that was it was very apropos to our project, but it was too close to Christmas. They wanted to get Billy Blazes out on the market a little bit sooner. So I couldn't think of another date that was appropriate. And I'm brainstorming in the meeting. I says, 911 is the emergency phone number in New York City. Why don't we have a 911 day in New York? So boys and girls, on 911, September 11, 2001, I was on my way to a press conference to introduce Fisher-Price's new rescue hero, Billy Blazes. And some of you might recognize him, and I have him here today. This was the new rescue hero being introduced on September 11, 2001 at 9 o'clock in the morning when the first jet struck the tower. On my way to the press conference, I saw the tower fully engulfed with flames, and I had to make a big decision. What do I do? Do I go to the press conference for Billy Blazes, which didn't happen anyway, or do I make my way to my old firehouse across the street from the Twin Towers? And that's what I did. Boys and girls, I didn't have to be there that day. I was in a dress uniform. I took my uniform off and borrowed a set of firefighting gear from somebody who was off duty, Tommy McNamara. And in that rescue effort, I was buried. And by the time the sun went down on the evening of September 11th, 2001, along with the 2,752 total victims that lost their lives that day, 344 firefighters were declared dead. 3 days later, one was found alive in another state, in a hospital, in an operating room, and that was me. And boys and girls, Billy Blazes would come to represent Those 343 heroes that I worked with who made the supreme sacrifice of life. So boys and girls, in closing, number one, I want to say God bless all of you, always and always. Let this day ignite you more than anything could ever ignite you. And promise me that you'll all grow up to be good Americans and love your country. And in closing, once again, boys and girls, thank you for this opportunity. And don't ever forget that Billy Blazes is the only rescue hero in the world that ever came to life. Superman's not real, Batman's not real, Spider-Man is not real. I hate to, even the Easter Bunny's not real. But boys and girls, Billy Blazes, a New York City firefighter rescue hero from Fisher-Price Toys, is the only rescue hero that represents real people, and that's not me. It was the other 343 firefighters who I get the honor of telling their story. So once again, I hope to see one of you or all of you again, maybe in future conventions throughout the states. And again, to everybody who made my day possible, thank you.
Mr. Torrillo, you are a true example of a fired up and passionate service leader. Your words of patriotism and inspiration have ignited a flame for service within each of us. Please accept this token of our appreciation on behalf of each of us that wear the blue jacket.
She must have been reading my Christmas list. Oh boy, this is great. You know something? I'll cherish this forever. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joe Torrillo.